It must come from this really weird, perverted place of envy that every single new movie has a male character that is just a complete and absolute utter. I just gotta wait for the 15-second mark before I say anything controversial. Just a little bit more. Just wait for the 50-second. Just a complete pussy. Like, I just right now finished the new My Adventures with Superman TV show. It just came out. It's a freaking pretty great show. Not even gonna lie. I enjoyed it, despite its very glaring flaws in multiple episodes. But one thing that I did notice, that I was just a little bit surprised about, that after thinking back at every single episode of this new My Adventures with Superman show, you know, a show about Superman, a superman, if you will, a guy so super that they even call him by that, he doesn't actually win a single fight alone. Not one in the entire story. Like, he doesn't ever take a W single-handedly. He's every single time he's saved by Lois Lane in every episode. Not one or two episodes, but all of them. Now, I am all for not having perfect characters. As you know, as a very flawed human being myself, as Twitter likes to remind you on every single day, with some viral tweet calling me cringe in some way or another, let me remind you right now that I am not perfect. And you know what? Newsflash! Neither are you. Don't unsubscribe. I'm sorry for saying the truth, but you're not. And it's really difficult to relate to perfect characters, which is why I personally don't generally like Superman so much. He's he's a Superman. That's a very personal take, but that said, Superman is supposed to be a Superman. That's his thing. Now, I like the concept on how Superman's struggle is the struggle to fit in when he's this Superman. So I overall do like that concept, and you can relate to his struggle for fitting in, even though I fit in because I still wet the bed. He doesn't fit in because he's this alien with superpowers. I don't fit in because I have a massive hentai addiction. We are not the same! That was a joke, obviously. It was for comedic effect. I've never even seen hentai before in my entire life. So when you write a character like Superman, whose major struggle is fitting into society, you can relate to that character flaw of his, that whole fitting into society shtick. When the character flaw of his is everything too, then you don't really have much of a Superman. Yeah, he has powers, and yes, he delivers the final punch, but by the fact that he needs to be saved by Lois Lane in every single episode of the show, that just kind of goes to diminish his uniqueness, his epicness in some way or another. I don't know if I'm the only one that felt that way, but honestly, I am all for Superman not being able to win every fight and Lois Lane needing to help him. All for that. But he has to win at least one fight himself, right? But he doesn't. And I watched the whole show. And it really got me thinking here, because this Superman show is a show that I like. And it got me thinking about how emasculated male characters have become in modern media. And it kind of makes me a little bit sad. Why is it that Nick Fury in the new Marvel Secret Invasion is an absolute bitch that doesn't actually do anything of value in the entire show? Like, why is it that in the new Indiana Jones movie, Indiana Jones is also kind of a bit of a pussy boy, just going on an adventure because, hey ho, cheerio. But he's just kind of a hobo, and his wife left him, and he's alone, and he's sad, and he's miserable. Why is it that Luke Skywalker in the new Star Wars I'm not even gonna talk about Luke Skywalker in the new Star Wars trilogy. I can hardly think of any character that is known as a heroic character, or as a badass in any way, that in some recent adaptation, iteration, or spin-off series about that character, they retain that level of badassity that they've once had. Like, I shudder to think of what Lord of the Rings would look like if it came out today. If you look at Lord of the Rings, it is the least problematic movie in the history of time. It's literally a story about good and evil and wholesomeness. There is no gray zone in Lord of the Rings, and that's part of what makes Lord of the Rings beautiful. It is purely a dichotomy, good versus evil, and every single step of the way you can understand how one action either falls to the side of good or of evil. It is the penultimate fantasy, and I love Lord of the Rings for that. It's one of my favorite movies of all time, and one of my favorite books as well. I've read it, I've watched it again, I've watched it even more times, and the extended editions and all that shit, but despite that fact, when I look at the characters in Lord of the Rings, they're very manly. I don't know how to say it in words that won't get me canceled here, but Aragorn has riz, baby, and there's something just really nice about that, to be honest, and it almost feels like a breath of fresh air, even though it almost feels like a cliche in the other direction. I do not understand why we don't have a character that is just as badass as Aragorn, or Legolas, or Gimli. They're not perfect characters. They have a lot of flaws, which is what makes them good characters. They're fucking badass. Like, they are. It's just every time I see people getting indoctrinated into the Andrew Tate side of the Force to believe that he is Jesus too, it always makes me wonder that if the reason why they are gravitating towards that incredibly red-pilled side of the world is because they are being pushed there by the people that are throwing the Luke Skywalkers and your Indiana Joneses at you, and your freaking Nick Furies at you in the other direction. I feel like especially on the internet landscape, and especially watching the media as it's being created, it's just feels like everything's so extreme to one side or the other, where there's no middle ground for anything at all. If you ask me, who's an example of the most badass character of all time, I would probably say like Guts from Berserk as a simple example of that. Now, Guts is a Giga-Chad, a very manly man, a man's man, truly the man of men. He is a huge guy with a huge sword that is definitely a metaphor for a huge, well, something else probably. The man just goes around oozing manly Giga-Chadness, and I love it so much, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't struggle. It doesn't mean he's a perfect character, and it doesn't mean that every decision he makes is the correct one. He makes a lot of mistakes, a lot of bad decisions, and he hates himself for some of those decisions that he's made, especially if you actually read the manga. He is a character that, despite the fact that he is incredibly awesome and he's one man against the world, he's literally struggling against his fate in every single episode and every single chapter, he is still, despite all that, a character that ends up needing to rely on the help of other people in order to accomplish his goals, in order to make his quest go further. He ends up developing and gathering like an entire ragtag team of men and women alike, and it doesn't really matter, and it doesn't, detract from his badassery at all. Why do you have a character like Guts, who's helped by Mage Lady, and dude is still the peak of masculinity, and then you have freaking Superman in the new My Adventures with Superman, and he's saved by Lois Lane, and he's somehow not exactly that peak. Honestly, if I had to put a finger on a single little teeny detail between these two, like as a differentiating factor, I would say it's because I almost feel like when Superman is taking an L and Lois Lane needs to push a button and then Superman can save the day, it's kind of contrived. It doesn't really fit so well. Superman is stronger, so why is Superman losing here? And it's kind of like just to remind you that, nope, Superman, he can't do it alone. He needs Lois Lane's help in order to accomplish it, and I kind of don't get that feeling at all from Guts. Guts is putting his 110% into everything he does. He is up against insurmountable odds, and every time he can even get a beacon, a tiny little fragment, a schniplet of help in any possible scenario, he will grab that hand like an olive branch and ride it to the finish line. Even when Guts gets help, he is still operating at his 110% maximum capacity here, still beating the odds despite the help he's getting. Whereas Superman will be in a case where he's somehow losing in some inconceivable way, and he'll get help that shouldn't really have needed to be helpful, and because of that help will actually manage to save the day because he's Superman. It's like this weird envy towards these characters that just sits there and festers and makes them want to turn these incredibly badass characters from our past or childhood or nostalgia into characters that are shells of what they used to be. And it kind of makes me sad. And it's not about never losing a fight. It's not about just being the strongest that makes a man manly, that shows off this epic masculinity. It's taking accountability, it's responsibility, it's growth. It's stuff like that that really makes these men manly, in my humble opinion. I think that you don't have a lot of more manly men than Uncle Iroh, and that man takes fat L's from time to time, and they're fat. And so is he. And despite all that, man is still the manliest man I would ever know. I freaking love that dude. He's confident, he's sure of himself, he's proud, he wants to give the next generation, he wants to create a world that's better for people in the future, a world that's better than the world they are inhabiting today. All these traits are what makes him manly. It's not about how strong he is, or about how laserizable he is. And it's not because he went through an incredibly sexy transformation in the prison. What makes him manly is the fact that he's standing up for these principles that he has, is that he's able to carry these principles to the absolute end goal and fight against the odds for the sake of these principles. And Guts does the same thing. And every character that I would consider a manly man does this thing. And that is really something that's just gone. I just look at the broken husks of former glorious characters in the modern era, and it just kind of makes me sad. It's the virtuous confidence that makes men manly. It's not about being a dumbass with bulging muscles. And especially in the realm of modern superhero movies, where I feel like they're still trying to get across that manliness, but They're just doing it as, oh, the guy is this handsome Giga Chad with massive biceps, but he's an absolute fucking dumbass. And the good thing he has the brand new female intern there to tell him what to do. Otherwise, he'd be screwed. I mean, I watched Ant-Man, and that's what happened there, and Thor, and everything else. Oh, don't worry, he's still so strong, and grrrr, he gurgles and schmurgles when he flurgles and blurgles. He even kisses his muscles before his mansles before he punches people.
Oh God, his dick must weigh so much.
But without the virtue and the selflessness and the drive to improve himself, he's not a manly man. At least not in my book. But anyway, this was my little rant about that. And I do believe it stems from some perverted version of envy. It's just this wish to suck the life out of something that was revered because it doesn't exactly fit the itinerary you want to put on the plate of the masses. Jesus, this was a cancelable take. Twitter, I hope you have this one written down, god damn it, because you are running out of ammunition. You're just calling me cringe for old songs now, and you're not actually hitting me where it hurts anymore, and I am offended that you're not trying harder. Stay weird, fam.